What a way to wake up on a Monday morning. That was Segression with Higher here on WODU, the heartbeat of Old Dominion University. I am TJ, the DJ, hanging out with you today, and we are kicking off another episode of Topical Applications. That's right, this is where we sit and discuss some general public interest stories happening in the news as of late. Typically try and consider a story on the campus of Old Dominion, as well as something to help you, the students of Old Dominion, as well as the community around Old Dominion University, be more informed and just more engaged in what's going on around you. Today's topics include the dedication ceremony for the Broderick Dinings Common, as well as the upcoming presidential debate occurring tonight. That's right, tonight there is a presidential debate happening, so we're going to get the lowdown on that, more information, and we're going to go over what it takes to be considered a winner in a debate as well, right here on Topical Applications, WODU, the heartbeat of Old Dominion University. I am TJ, the DJ, hanging out here with you each and every Monday morning from 10:30 until 11:30 a.m. So always come by, see what we're talking about, see if you're going to enjoy it, and if not, well, you can keep on going. You can always stream us, Spreaker, YouTube, live stream, as well as tunein.org or .com, and check us out. There's lots of great shows happening here on WODU. I have two. I have this one as well as my music show happening Fridays from 2:30 until 1:30. Man, I am just off this morning. I need more coffee or something. Somebody send me some coffee down here to Webb Center, WODU Studios, all the way at the south end. Oh, what it would be to have a cup of coffee right now. All I have right now is my water bottle, and I'm already struggling. Oh, well, that's what happens when you're an insomniac, and then you have to get up and figure out what the hot topic in the news is that you'd like to cover and talk for an hour on the radio. So therefore I'm trying to get myself together this morning. Hopefully we can get it together, because it takes a community to bring everybody up. Always remember that. Always remember to support your fellow humans. And that is a public service announcement from TJ the DJ on Topical Applications. Always support your fellow humans. That's what we need to do. All right, well, we are going to get into it, and I am just going to read the press release here for you and talk about some of the conversations I've had across campus once we get through all this information that the campus of Old Dominion University here in Norfolk, Virginia has released. More than 1,500 came together for the dedication of the Broderick Dining Commons facility. Old Dominion President John Broderick used the dedication of a new state-of-the-art dining facility to make an impassioned plea for a more inclusive university community. The September 23rd dedication of the Kate and John R. Broderick Dining Commons was attended by more than 1,500 students, faculty, staff, and members of the community. Old Dominion's president said he hopes it becomes a gathering place where users seek to uphold the university's commitment to diversity and inclusiveness. Help me keep my promise that nobody on this campus ever feels alone or marginalized, President Broderick said. Kate and I sincerely hope the dining facility is a setting to spend time to better know and understand each other. President Broderick cited the highly publicized example of a Florida State football player who sat with lonely student Bo Pask and who has autism during a visit to the boys' high school. Let's make efforts like that the norm in this building going forward, he said. The commitment to diversity and inclusiveness across campus by President and First Lady Broderick is part of the reason student leaders approached administrators last winter to express their desire to name the university's first standalone dining facility in honor of their contributions. Former ODU Board of Visitors Rector Ronald Ripley, class of 72, told the crowd about being invited to a meeting with student leaders last winter where the idea was raised. Ripley said the Board of Visitors was considering the same gesture, which was unprecedented for a sitting university administrator. He wanted to hear the student leaders, though, and their rationale. One after another, they delivered heartfelt tributes to the President and First Lady. It's astounding what the university has done under his leadership, Ripley said. John Broderick will go down as one of the best presidents in Old Dominion University history, and I submit the best. Ellen Neufeld, Vice President of Student Engagement and Enrollment Services and the MC of the dedication event, said the size of the crowd that gathered was a testament to the appreciation felt for the Brodericks by the university community. Kate Broderick became emotional as she recalled being informed of the honor. Your kindness will be something we carry in our heads for all of our lives, she said. Speakers, including former student athlete Ivan Militar, Samantha Conyers of the ODU NAACP, former Yvonne Broderick Award recipient Charles Chiao, Women's Initiative Network mentee Famata Pasawi, and Violet Stauderman, who became friends with the First Lady Kate Broderick through the university's Office of Educational Accessibility, relayed personal anecdotes about the Old Dominion First family's warmth, compassion, and love for the university. As an international student coming to Old Dominion University, no one has made me feel more welcomed and supported than President Broderick and Kate Broderick, said Petra Zonyegi, the current student representative on the Board of Visitors. Student Government Association President Rachel Edmonds and former two-term SGA President Christopher Durtu gave the final tribute to the Brodericks. Edmonds announced a new Old Dominion University tradition in which a commemorative coin will be dedicated annually. She said the inaugural coin will include an image of the dining commons. The event also included a performance by the ODU Marching Monarchs and an appearance by Big Blue and the university's cheer and dance teams. Following the dedication, participants toured the building and sampled gourmet selections from the dining Commons culinary offerings. The Dining Commons is designed to provide a restaurant-style environment featuring a diverse array of options while creating a strong sense of community. The main dining area will feature 8 distinct options. They include Bud's American Classics, which will have classic dishes that exude regional comfort, May's South American Kitchen, Brazilian-style steakhouse with a churrasco grill and rotisserie, Evo, or maybe it's EVOO, Italian cuisine. I'm going to say Evo, though. Gourmet thin crust pizza and other traditionally prepared specialties. Rice Sticks Asian Kitchen, High Top Noodle Bar, Hibachi Grill, and daily featured hot wok. Uno Mas fresh Mexican flavors made from scratch entrees, tortillas, and salsa bar. Mosaic International tapas, or small plates, is the definition of tapas. Selections from around the world. 350 degrees baked goods, pies, cakes, cookies, donuts, and bread made by in-house pastry chefs and bakers. So that's just a lowdown on the brand new Broderick Dining Commons, opening in just a couple of weeks. I do believe I have heard rumor around campus. Don't have the exact date in front of me. However, I was told towards the beginning of October is when that's supposed to occur. I was out and about on campus last week, spoke with the Director of Public Relations here at Old Dominion University when I was covering a story for the Mason Crown, and he was excited about this happening, and just, you know, he made my mouth water just describing what was going on. And I'm a vegetarian, so in order to make my mouth water, it takes a lot, because most people are always talking about their meat, you know, the meat that they're going to consume, whether it's a steak or seafood or whatever. So he had me excited. I'm interested in going by, checking out the place just to see what's going on over there. And we will go from there and see what goes on with the Broderick Dining Commons. Again, this is an unprecedented event, naming a building for a seated administrator. And President Broderick seems to have a lot of praises sung his way here on campus, as well as with his wife. And so, you know, that's one of the things that they've tried to do here at Old Dominion University, is create a campus of inclusiveness. So we will see where this goes. It's a great idea. Hopefully all the students will utilize this to its capabilities, including the atmosphere that the President and First Lady of Old Dominion University would like to embrace here at the new Broderick Dining Commons. So come on by. There it is. I see the date right here. October 12th is when it opens. So October 12th, and you can visit the Monarch Dining website for more information. Just go to ODU.edu and then look for Monarch Dining on that, and you will find the Monarch Dining website. I am TJ the DJ. This is Topical Applications on WODU, the heartbeat of Old Dominion University. You can find us on your campus TV as well as Spreaker, TuneIn, YouTube Live. I'm streaming it live on my personal Facebook live stream, and then the video is also available to be picked up after it has aired on the archives on YouTube Live. So welcome to Topical Applications, happening each and every Monday here on WODU, 10:30 to 11:30, where we discuss just public interest stories of the day, of the week, what's been going on, what's been happening in the news. And being a communications student here at Old Dominion University, especially public relations, persuasion, and advocacy concentration, I decided today to discuss debates because it's something that seems to have turned into somewhat of a dog and pony show in this day and age of politics. And I just don't appreciate it as a communicator, as someone who actually enjoys good educational debates, well thought out debates with content, with context, with texture. You just don't see that in the political arenas today. So I figured we would work on being more engaged viewers today of debates, listen to some debate gaffes of the past, if you will. And I actually just had to study one of these, the first one we're going to lead off with today, for my public relations class, because it was the first televised presidential debate between then Vice President Richard Nixon and Senator Kennedy at the time, going into Kennedy's election there. And it was the first televised presidential debate. So there were a lot of differences in opinion as to who actually won the debate, because those who listened on the radio thought Nixon won it. Those who watched on television thought Kennedy won it. And I'll let you listen, make up your own mind, and then we'll analyze it here in a few minutes. First of all, kind of giving you a little background on this. I try and pay attention to multiple news outlets and try and find the most neutral one. Now, granted, most news outlets do have their biases, I will admit, and so I try and find ones that are kind of more mainstream, more towards the neutral side. And so this one we're going with CNN on politics here, and the article was released this morning by Nia Malika Henderson on CNN, who is a senior political reporter for CNN. So that was kind of the basis of where I was going with this topic idea today. And basically, presidential debates are supposed to be kind of tough on topics. They're supposed to put them in a situation where they might have to sweat and think a little, because that's what we expect out of a leader of a country such as the United States of America, is a leader who can maintain composure under pressure. And so, again, being a communications major, I enjoy analyzing situations like this. I've been in one major debate as far as on this type of scale. Last year, I was in a debate on Fox News, and so I feel I have a little bit of understanding as to where they're coming from. However, mine was not as formal as what a presidential debate is. And I was actually in a room by myself. The fellow I was debating was in another room. We both happened to be in Washington, D.C. together. However, they still put us in separate rooms. And we basically had a moderator in between the two of us and went back and forth for about 4.5 minutes. Now, that's not a long time on a debate stage. It feels like a long time. I will tell you that from personal experience. It does feel like an extremely long time, 4 minutes. So imagine having this up there for an hour or 2 hours, as some of these debates have gone on in this political season that we've been watching over the last year and a half. So you have to keep these things in consideration. However, at the same time, you also have to consider that these people are showcasing their debating skills, their negotiation skills, their ability to maintain composure under pressure, and not show. One of my favorite things is watching facial expressions and body language and seeing when someone gets frustrated, because you can see it, whether it's through their breathing, whether it's through sweating, whether it's through the way that they choose their words. There's a lot of different telltale signs of people who might crack under pressure. And that's why debates are good, especially when we're working with political offices such as President of the United States of America, Vice President. I don't even understand why they really have too much of a debate between the two vice presidents, because the saying goes with the vice president's just one heartbeat away from being president. You know, they do sit as the president of the Senate. However, you don't really see a lot of action from the vice presidents per se. Now, they do have a lot going on behind the scenes. However, it's not as glamorous as, say, the president of the United States of America or an actual senator or a governor of a state. Those debates tend, in my opinion, to need to hold more content, more context than what the vice president candidates have to say. Now, I do agree that we should hear what they have to say. We should see what their negotiation skills are. However, I just don't believe that those debates hold as much weight as a debate between presidential candidates. So the first debate we're going to analyze this morning is the Kennedy and Nixon debate. Happened in 1960. And like I said, we're just going to kind of listen to this. It's about a 4.5 minute long clip here from the opening of that debate. We're going to then discuss it, and I will give you my views on what happened there. Again, I'm not really trying to tell you who's a winner, who's a loser. I am going to look at historical analysis, what the media has said, what other people have said, and let you kind of make your own mind up. And all of these videos can be found on YouTube. I will probably create a playlist once I get out of the studio and back home, so you can pull these up and actually see the body language and the facial expressions, because that tells a lot. And in this day of multimedia, that is one thing that we need to pay attention to, because, again, there are people who have a tough time keeping their facial expressions hidden. And when you're talking about negotiations and talks on the international scale, there are a lot of things that other people find offensive that we might not find offensive within the confines of our own borders. So let's listen to the Nixon and Kennedy first televised presidential debate here on Topical Applications, WODU. I am TJ the DJ.
The first question to Senator Kennedy from Mr. Fleming.
Senator, the Vice President in his campaign has said that you are naive and at times immature. He has raised the question of leadership. On this issue, why do you think people should vote for you rather than the Vice President?
Well, the Vice President and I came to the Congress together. 1946, we both served in the Labor Committee. I've been there now for 14 years, the same period of time that he has. So that our experience in government is comparable. Secondly, I think the question is, what are the programs that we advocate? What is the party record that we lead? I come out of the Democratic Party, which in this century has produced Woodrow Wilson and Franklin Roosevelt and Harry Truman, and which supported and sustained these programs which I've discussed tonight. Mr. Nixon comes out of the Republican Party. He was nominated by it. And it is a fact that through most of these last 25 years, the Republican leadership has opposed federal aid for education, medical care for the aged, development of the Tennessee Valley, development of our natural resources. I think Mr. Nixon is an effective leader of his party. I hope he would grant me the same. The question before us is, which point of view and which party do we want to lead the United States?
Mr. Nixon, would you like to comment on that statement?
I have no comment.
The next question to Vice President Nixon from Mr. Van Oker.
Mr. Vice President, since the question of executive leadership is a very important campaign issue, I'd like to follow Mr. Noven's question. Now, Republican campaign slogans, you'll see them on signs around the country as we did last week, say, it's experience that counts. That's over a picture of yourself, sir. Implying that you've had more governmental executive decision-making experience than your opponent. Now, in his news conference on August 24th, President Eisenhower was asked to give one example of a major idea of yours that he adopted. His reply was, and I'm quoting, "If you give me a week, I might think of one. I don't remember." Now, that was a month ago, sir, and the President hasn't brought it up since. And I'm wondering, sir, if you can clarify which version is correct, the one put out by Republican campaign leaders or the one put out by President Eisenhower?
Well, I would suggest, Mr. Van Oker, that if you know the President, that was probably a facetious remark. I would also suggest that insofar as his statement is concerned, that I think it would be improper for the President of the United States to disclose the instances in which members of his official family had made recommendations, as I have made them through the years, to him which he has accepted or rejected. The President has always maintained, and very properly so, that he is entitled to get what advice he wants from his cabinet and from his other advisors without disclosing that to anybody, including, as a matter of fact, the Congress. Now, I can only say this. Through the years, I have sat in the National Security Council. I have been in the cabinet. I have met with the legislative leaders. I have met with the President when he made the great decisions with regard to Lebanon, Kimoy Matsu, other matters. The President has asked for my advice. I have given it. Sometimes my advice has been taken. Sometimes it is not. I do not say that I have made the decisions, and I would say that no president should ever allow anybody else to make the major decisions. The President only makes the decisions. All that his advisors do is to give counsel when he asks for it. As far as what experience counts and whether that is experience that counts, that isn't for me to say. I can only say that my experience is there for the people to consider. Senator Kennedy's is there for the people to consider. As he pointed out, we came to the Congress in the same year. His experience has been different from mine. Mine has been in the executive branch. His has been in the legislative branch. I would say that the people now have the opportunity to evaluate his as against mine, and I think both he and I are going to abide by whatever the people decide.
That right there was the Kennedy-Nixon debate here on WODU, Topical Applications. I am TJ the DJ hanging out with you. And we're going over debates today because there is a presidential debate happening tonight on television, the first of 3 presidential debates. That right there was the first ever televised presidential debate, as I said, between then Vice President Richard Nixon and Senator John F. Kennedy. Of course, Kennedy would go on to win that election cycle, and then of course Nixon comes back and wins another one not too much longer after that, and then the Watergate scandal happens. So and you know, and that's some other stuff to think about as well. You know, Kennedy won the election, and then, you know, he's eventually assassinated. Nixon was vice president at the time, comes back to be president a couple of cycles later, and so it's interesting to think of the circumstances that were going on around, you know, what was happening outside of just the debate is what I'm trying to come up with here. And the reason being, if you look at the video footage, then you see Kennedy is extremely composed. He's relaxed. He's sitting there with his legs crossed at the beginning. And Nixon, in comparison, is very pale. Kennedy had just been campaigning for a good long while in California in a convertible. So I think the analysis, one of the analyses that I read, and I think it's been multiple as well, is that Kennedy was nice and bronzed from the California sun. Nixon refused to wear makeup on television. And so that in of itself, Nixon's face and the black and white screen kind of blended in with the background of the walls of the debate stage, whereas Kennedy, he stood out, he looked healthy, and Nixon had just spent like 2 weeks in a hospital recovering from an injury as vice president, yet Kennedy was suffering from the debilitating pains of Addison's disease. So there's a lot of things that go into consideration here when we're evaluating this. And then you look at it and you'd almost think that based on the circumstances, it'd be the other way around, that Nixon would be very relaxed and composed and Kennedy should kind of be a little antsy and edgy. However, I think a lot of it comes down to natural ability, the ability to express yourself, to let your words work in your favor. And in my opinion, that is where Nixon came up short against Kennedy, was the combination of his body language, how he appeared, as well as the way he came across, because in my mind he came across as very demanding and as a type A dominator versus someone trying to win over the will of the people. And that was the first example of debate. So just kind of trying to get in the mood of the debate this evening, be a more engaged, more informed, a better informed viewer, participant in the democratic process this evening, because these debates really do come across as a dog and pony show if you don't really pay much attention to it. And honestly, I am going to watch tonight's debate. I already have my personal opinions formed as to what's going on. My viewership is more out of that of someone who enjoys seeing communication, seeing people go back and forth, and see what can come of these two people vying for the seat of president of the United States, of course, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And so we're going to analyze a few more debates, as well as we're going to look at some of the debates that Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, having at least an example of each person's debating skills and style here on Topical Applications on WODU today in just a little bit. Like I said, I am TJ the DJ. You can hear this show every Monday from 10:30 until 11:30, where we talk about general public interest stories. So we're going to move on to the next debate here, and we're looking at, this was Gerald Ford versus Jimmy Carter. So we're going about 16 years in the future. I love this time traveling machine known as the internet and digital media. And so we start out in 1960. We're going to 1976 next, 16 years later. And this is where Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter are debating. Gerald Ford was then the sitting president, and Jimmy Carter was running for president. Of course, he would be a one-term president after this election cycle. And then we run into Ronald Reagan's presidency and so on and so forth. And this one in particular is interesting because President Ford really kind of fumbled the football almost. He lost himself. He said something that he probably shouldn't have said. He should have taken a second to absorb the information being shared and then responded. And then even after he tripped all over his response, discussing the spread of the Soviet Union into Eastern Europe. Again, this is 1976 we're talking about, so this is the height of the Cold War. After President Ford said that wasn't happening, and again, he's a seated president, so he watches and sees all this stuff, the moderator, the person who posed the question, gives him an opportunity to go back and reconsider the words that he just shared, and he still just outright denies what's going on. And that's kind of a tough thing there, because you get a second chance. And with a second chance, it's tough because you don't go back and follow up when you're given the opportunity. And that's what needs to happen in a situation like this. So here is a clip from that President Ford Jimmy Carter debate in 1976.
Mr. President, I'd like to explore a little more deeply our relationship with the Russians. Our allies in France and Italy are now flirting with communism. We've recognized a permanent communist regime in East Germany. We've virtually signed in Helsinki an agreement that the Russians have dominance in Eastern Europe.
I'm glad you raised it, Mr. Franco. In the case of Helsinki, 35 nations signed an agreement, including the Secretary of State for the Vatican. I can't under any circumstances believe that His Holiness the Pope would agree by signing that agreement that the 35 nations have turned over to the Warsaw Pact nations the domination of Eastern Europe. It just isn't true. There is no Soviet domination of Eastern Europe, and there never will be under a Ford administration.
I'm sorry, could I just follow? Did I understand you to say, sir, that the Russians are not using Eastern Europe as their own sphere of influence and occupying most of the countries there and making sure with their troops that it's a communist zone?
I don't believe, Mr. Franco, that the Yugoslavians consider themselves dominated by the Soviet Union. I don't believe that the Romanians consider themselves dominated by the Soviet Union. I don't believe that the Poles consider themselves dominated by the Soviet Union. Each of those countries is independent, autonomous. It has its own territorial integrity. And the United States does not concede that those countries are under the domination of the Soviet Union.
That right there was the President Ford Jimmy Carter debate of 1976, where President Gerald Ford outright just denied that there was a Soviet domination in Eastern Europe at the time. Here on Topical Applications, WODU, the heartbeat of Old Dominion University, found on TuneIn, Spreaker, YouTube, live stream as well. Hey to you out there in YouTube land. And you can find us at WODUstudios.com. Again, that's WODUstudios.com. And then you can stream us from the links on that website. And we just listened to the Ford versus Carter 1976 presidential debate. And basically, the reason that one's important to consider when trying to become a more informed participant in the democratic process and viewing these debates is because President Ford didn't go back and bring his statements back around to more truthful, more honest statements. He did what you might hear tonight in consideration of some of Donald Trump's potential comments. You might hear some analysts say that instead of backing up and fixing statements, he doubled down on what he said and was even more emphatic about the situation. And you know, again, Mr. Frankel, the journalist there, gave President Ford the opportunity to come back around and circle around and fix his comments during the debate. However, he did not. And so a lot of times you hear the debaters state that, you know, the moderators didn't do their job, or they weren't doing a good job, or they were, you know, all against the one person and helping out the other person. Now, this is an example where they actually allowed the president an opportunity to circle back on what he should have said, and he still just doubled down on what he was discussing. And that's why, you know, you need to pay attention to things like that, because again, it is signs of a leader. It's signs that show you know, how a leader will perform under that pressure, because the debate stage is an extreme pressure to be had. And now the next clip we're going to go into is one from the Bush-Dukakis debate of 1988. And during this debate, it wasn't such a tough question, and it was an opportunity for Michael Dukakis to really shine on the stage if he were just to kind of take more of a humanist approach. And it was a question regarding if his wife were raped, would he support the death penalty? And Dukakis just goes off on a tangent in the opinion of the analysts of this response, and he never even once mentions his wife. And that's where the issues arose there, because he was basically given kind of a sure shot almost to wrap it up, to bring it around, to really say what, you know, how he felt, make himself look like a human. And then he just fumbled the football. We're gonna use that term a lot, I guess, during this conversation. He dropped the ball. He did not show himself as a humane, you know, like in a human light, and he just looked somewhat fake and prepared in his response. So let's listen to this is Bernard Shaw asking the question of Michael Dukakis in the 1988 presidential debate here on Topical Applications, WODU. I'm TJ the DJ.
For the next 90 minutes, we will be questioning the candidates following a format designed and agreed to by representatives of the two campaigns. However, there are no restrictions on the questions that my colleagues and I can ask this evening, and the candidates have no prior knowledge of our questions. By agreement between the candidates, the first question goes to Governor Dukakis. You have 2 minutes to respond. Governor, if Kitty Dukakis were raped and murdered, would you favor an irrevocable death penalty for the killer?
No, I don't, Bernard, and I think you know that I've opposed the death penalty during all of my life. I don't see any evidence that it's a deterrent, and I think there are better and more effective ways to deal with violent crime. We've done so in my own state, and it's one of the reasons why we have had the biggest drop in crime of any industrial state in America, why we have the lowest murder rate of any industrial state in America. But we have work to do in this nation. We have work to do to fight a real war, not a phony war against drugs, and that's something that I want to lead, something we haven't had over the course of the past many years, even though the Vice President has been, at least allegedly, in charge of that war. We have much to do to step up that war, to double the number of drug enforcement agents, to fight both here and abroad, to work with our neighbors in this hemisphere, and I want to call a hemispheric summit just as soon after the 20th of January as possible to fight that war. But we also have to deal with drug education and prevention here at home. And that's one of the things that I hope I can lead personally as the President of the United States. We've had great success in my own state, and we've reached out to young people and their families and been able to help them by beginning drug education and prevention in the early elementary grades. So we can fight this war, and we can win this war. And we can do so in a way that marshals our forces, that provides real support for state and local law enforcement officers who have not been getting that kind of support, do it in a way which will bring down violence in this nation, will help our youngsters to stay away from drugs, will stop this avalanche of drugs that's pouring into the country, and will make it possible for our kids and our families to grow up in safe and secure and decent neighborhoods.
Mr. Vice President, your 1 minute rebuttal.
Well, a lot of what this campaign is about, it seems to me, Bernie, gets to a question of values. And here I do have, on this particular question, a big difference with my opponent. You see, I do believe that some crimes are so heinous, so brutal, so outrageous, and I'd say particularly those that result in the death of a police officer. Those real brutal crimes, I do believe in the death penalty. And I think it is a deterrent. And I believe we need it. And I'm glad that the Congress moved on this drug bill and have finally called for that. related to these narcotics drug kingpins. And so we just have an honest difference of opinion. I support it, and he doesn't.
That right there, the 1988 debate between Governor Michael Dukakis of Massachusetts and then Vice President Bush. And again, like I said, that was the 1988 debate here on Topical Applications, WODU, the heartbeat of Old Domain University. I am TJ the DJ, hanging out with you today, and we are talking about being more informed consumers of presidential debates today, because there is a presidential debate happening tonight on television, and I am trying to grab the information now, as I forgot to grab it earlier. I'm surprised. I am ill prepared, I guess I can say. I will admit that. I'm not going to double down, say, no, I do not have that information, nor will I have it. However, I will pull it up during the next debate video to discuss, give you information as to, I believe it's happening on CNN, but don't quote me on that. You'll probably be able to find it on many, many channels, as well as analysis. And I personally prefer to put them on something like C-SPAN, if C-SPAN is carrying the information, and then that way you don't have a color analysis of it. A lot of times there's a little bit of interruption during the debates from the color analysts to bring some stuff around to follow up on some stuff and all. So I prefer C-SPAN because it's pretty much unbiased, and there might be bias in there because it's funded by the cable industry. However, C-SPAN is a fairly accurate representation without too much influence one way or the other. And so getting back into that debate, though, with Governor Dukakis and then Vice President Bush, 1988, again, Dukakis was handed something that he could really just take and swing for the fences and kind of portray himself as not plastic, not Teflon, and show people he actually had feelings like a normal human being. And instead, he just kind of goes off in left field. He's way out there. I think by the time he finishes, he's talking about drug eradication, and he's supposed to be talking about how to punish the hypothetical rapist / murderer if it happened to his wife and his own personal family. And Dukakis never once even mentions his wife in his response. And, like I said, and again, we need to take into consideration what's going on in 1988. This is, again, Reagan is still in power. So we're seeing a lot of the war on drugs. I would assume that is why Dukakis carries it to the war on drugs. And we know how that's worked out since then. We're almost 30 years past, and seeing how much of a failure that has been, the policies in which Reagan implemented and then Bush carried out, and as well as Clinton. Clinton carried out some pretty bad stuff in the war on drugs as well. You can't say it's necessarily one side or the other, but a lot of it kind of came, it was broken up by President Carter, and then President Reagan, really started implemented the Just Say No campaign. And so I believe that's why Dukakis carried that conversation where he did. However, that wasn't the place to put it. And then Vice President Bush, I thought he sounded rather eloquent in his response, and he really, really, really stated what needed to be stated as far as the debate stage goes in this situation. And so that's why, Dukakis kind of fell apart. And again, a lot of times if you do fall apart in a debate and then you start thinking about that one response, you tend to continue that cycle, and it keeps snowballing downhill further and further and further out of control. And then you basically don't come across as someone who might have the skills, the negotiation skills, the communication skills to be commander-in-chief of the most well-funded military in the world, you know, as well as one of the largest powers in the world. So I think in that situation where Dukakis really failed, and the analysis as provided in the CNN article by Nia Malika Henderson is kind of on par with this, the fact that Dukakis just didn't come across as human, and that was what he needed to do in that situation. Again, you're listening to Topical Applications here on WODU, the heartbeat of Old Dominion University. I am TJ the DJ, sitting here talking about being an informed debate consumer this evening when the presidential debate occurs, and we will have all the details on that in just a few minutes. Again, we started off analyzing the first ever televised debate between Vice President Richard Nixon and then Senator Kennedy in 1960, where Nixon, who had just got out of the hospital for an injury, was very disheveled. His appearance, he refused to wear makeup. Kennedy looked relaxed, just kind of chill on stage there. And their delivery, in my opinion, kind of reflected how they looked on stage. And yet the people that heard the debate on the radio thought Nixon had won. People that saw it on TV, again, this is the first time a television audience had viewed a presidential debate. The television viewers thought Kennedy had won. Of course, Kennedy would go on to win the election. And so yet Kennedy was battling Addison's disease, very, very painful disease. And he had been on the campaign trail for a while, and he was wore out. So you would have thought that it was a shoo-in for Nixon, yet it seemed to be disputed as to who won, depending on what medium you caught. Then the next debate we looked over was the Ford-Carter debate of 1976. Then President Ford and I believe it was Governor Carter at the time of Georgia, they debated 1976, and here, President Ford did something that you will probably hear analysts say a lot tonight, in doubling down on his comments. Instead of backing up when he was allowed the chance by Mr. Frankel, the moderator, to back up and fix his statements where he said there is no Soviet domination of Eastern Europe and that will never be under a Ford administration, yet it was happening in 1976. It was apparent it was happening, and there was no holding back, covering up that it was happening. And yet, you know, President Ford said that it wouldn't happen in his administration. The moderator, Mr. Frankel, goes back and gives Ford a chance to fix his comments, and yet he still does not, allowing, again, an opportunity for President Carter to shine. And so that situation was the second one. The third one we just analyzed was Michael Dukakis, governor of Massachusetts, and then Vice President George Bush, 1988. Of course, Reagan was in office then, and Dukakis was supposed to be talking about the death penalty, and he goes about talking about the war on drugs, and it was supposed to be a more intimate question, as the question was framed in such to ask a hypothetical what his response would be to the possible rapist or murderer of his own wife. And again, Dukakis never even mentioned his own wife. And part of being, you know, good with communication is being able to relate to the question at hand. And you'll probably see a lot of deflection this evening. There will be a plethora of deflection this evening, I'm sure, on that debate stage between former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, as well as reality TV star Donald Trump. I guess that's his biggest claim to fame. That's what he's most well known as, is a reality TV star. And that's what I guess his most recent known endeavor has been. And so you're going to see a lot of people, a lot of them deflecting the questions, whereas typically what you should do is bring it back to some key issues. And again, the rules on the debate this evening it's going to be 6 key topics. They're going to have 6 key topics that the questions are going to be based around. I think it's 15 minutes per topic, and they each get a specified amount of time to respond to the question, the person at which the question is directed, and then the other debater gets to rebut that situation, and then they have an opportunity after those 4 minutes of direct responses to have what they're calling a deeper conversation. However, I don't know if it's necessarily going to be that much in depth because, again, on the debate stage with candidates like this, a lot of times they don't want to dig too deep. They want to kind of appeal to both sides of the audience. So therefore, they're going to say a few words that appeal to the left side and a few words that appeal to the right side. And that was where that Governor Dukakis question came into play, is they were trying to get him as a Democratic governor of, you know, a state that's somewhat progressive to kind of relate and associate with the right side of the fence, and he was unable to bring it home. The next debate, let's see, what do we have going on here? I think we are going to go into the actual debaters this evening, and I am going to start off with a highlight from a GOP debate in which Jeb Bush, governor of Florida, goes back and forth with Donald Trump. And again, this is possibly what we can expect to see this evening from Donald Trump. This is behavior that he has become known for on the debate stage. I tried to pick something that kind of showcased him and his, I guess we could call it, style of debate. And so let's take a listen. This is him going back and forth with Jeb Bush on the Republican debate stage. I believe it was earlier this year or late last year. I can't remember exactly which one. However, here we go. Donald Trump will be debating Hillary Clinton tonight. We're talking about it here on Topical Applications, WODU, the heart of Old Dominion University. I am TJ the DJ.
What Donald Trump did was use eminent domain to try to take the property of an elderly woman on the Strip in Atlantic City. That is not public purpose. That is downright wrong. And here's the problem with that.
All right, okay.
The problem was it was to tear down. It was to
Jeb
tear
wants
down.
to be. He wants to be a tough guy. He wants to be a tough guy
It was
tonight.
to tear down
I didn't
the
take
house,
the property.
and the net result was you tried.
I didn't
and
take
you
the
lost
property.
in the court.
The woman ultimately didn't want to do that.
That is not true.
And
the
it was
simple
great that
fact
I
is,
didn't.
to turn this into a limousine parking lot for his casinos is not a public use. And in Florida, based on what we did, we made that impossible. It is part of our Constitution. That's the better approach. That is the conservative approach.
Mr. Trump, take 30 seconds.
Let me just, he wants to be a tough guy. A lot of times, you'll have, and it doesn't work very well with
How tough is it to take property from an elderly woman?
Let me talk. Quiet.
How tough is it?
A lot of times, that's all of his donors and special interests out there. So, that's what it is. That's what, and by the way, let me just tell you, we needed tickets. You can't get them. You know who has the tickets for I'm talking about to the television audience? Donors, special interest, the people that are putting up the money. So it is. The RNC told us we have all donors in the audience, and the reason they're not loving me, the reason they're not loving me is I don't want their money. I'm going to do the right thing for the American public. I don't want their money. I don't need their money. And I'm the only one up here that can say that. Eminent domain, the Keystone Pipeline, do you consider that a private job?
I consider it a public use.
No, let me ask you, Jeb. Do you consider the Keystone Pipeline private? Is it public or private?
It's a public use.
Oh, really? A public use? No,
Yeah.
It's a private job.
It's a public use.
It's a private job.
Established by the courts, federal, state
You
courts.
wouldn't have the Keystone Pipeline that you want so badly without eminent domain.
All right, gentlemen,
You wouldn't have massive, excuse me, Josh, you wouldn't have massive factories without eminent domain.
Gentlemen, we do have to move forward.
That right there, Donald Trump and Jeb Bush going back and forth earlier in the Republican debates in this presidential election season. And of course, and you can't really get the full effect here on the radio on WODU. The show is Topical Applications. I am TJ the DJ. However, you look at the video, you watch the video, and you see, I mean, Trump he's literally flaring. He's really excited. You can see his emotion in his face. And again, while that might appeal to some, that is not a really excellent strategy when it comes to debating fellow leaders. You know, again, he just walks all over Governor Bush. And he just doesn't really maintain composure, and he doesn't have, a orchestrated style, I guess would be a good way to put it. It's just kind of flamboyant and reactionary versus planned. And again, he said a lot of things I don't need the Republican money. However, now as the presidential candidate, he is taking money from the donors in the Republican Party. And again, these are the types of statements that Trump would possibly double down on, as they like to say. And instead of stating, well, I may have misspoke there, or that was a different situation, he might just say, I don't need the money if it comes up tonight. And so that's a tactic that we've seen from Trump in particular in this stretched out race for the 2016 presidential candidates, and he doubles down a lot. He, instead of taking that opportunity like we discussed a few minutes ago with Mr. President Ford, and backing up when given the opportunity and fixing a mistake that you made, Trump, like President Ford in 1976, tends to just say, I said what I mean and I meant what I said. And that, might not be the best way to go about doing things as a communicator, as a negotiator, as a world leader. So finally today, we're going to hear a clip from former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton when she was on the Democratic debate stage. And then we will come back, give some analysis, wrap up today's show, and give you the information on the presidential debate this evening, and be on our merry ways. Enjoy the rest of our Monday. This is Topical Applications on WODU. I am TJ the DJ. Here is Hillary Clinton debating Senator Bernie Sanders.
The governor of this state should understand that his dereliction of duty was irresponsible. He should resign.
I agree. The governor should resign or be recalled. Everything that is done has to be triple checked to regain your trust.
You are paying 3 times more for poison water than I'm paying in Burlington, Vermont for clean water. First thing you do is you say people are not paying a water bill for poisoned water. Secretary Clinton supported virtually every one of these disastrous trade agreements written by corporate America that American workers should not be forced to compete against people in Vietnam.
He was against the auto bailout. I voted to save the auto industry. He voted against the money that ended up saving the auto industry. I think that is a pretty big difference.
Well, if you are talking about the Wall Street bailout, where some of your friends destroyed this economy, excuse me, I'm talking.
Let him respond. So when I talk about Senator Sanders being a one-issue candidate, I mean very clearly, you have to make hard choices when you're in positions of responsibility. And I went with Barack Obama. You did not. If everybody had voted the way he did, I believe the auto industry would have collapsed, taking 4 million jobs with it.
One of the major issues, Secretary Clinton says I'm a one-issue person. Well, I guess so. My one issue is trying to rebuild a disappearing middle class. That's my one issue. A great nation is judged not by how many millionaires and billionaires it has, but by how it treats the most vulnerable amongst us. And that is the children, and that is the elderly. And we are, if elected president, going to invest a lot of money into mental health. And when you watch these Republican debates, you know why we need to invest in mental health.
The last time I checked, as of last night, Donald Trump had received 3.6 million votes, which is a good number. And there's only one candidate in either party who has more votes than him, and that's me.
That Sanders versus Trump does a lot better than Clinton versus Trump.
Being a white person in the United States of America, I know that I've never had the experience that so many of the people in this audience have had.
When you're white, you don't know what it's like to be living in a ghetto. You don't know what it's like to be poor. You don't know what it's like to be hassled when you walk down the street.
That right there was Senator Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton on the Democratic debate stage earlier this year. We're talking presidential debates here on WODU Topical Applications. I'm TJ the DJ. And just to give you that information on the presidential debate, it's happening tonight from 9 until 10:30 p.m. I know CNN is advertising that they're showing it. I think I've stumbled across them being aired as well on other channels. And like I said earlier, they typically provide commentary and analysis during the debates. I always look to see if CNN or C-SPAN rather is airing the debates as well, because typically on C-SPAN you can either choose which side of the platform you'd like to hear analysis from or no analysis at all. So you have a little bit more choice of, you know, where your bias lies on C-SPAN if they are airing that debate and you have access to cable. And you can also typically find these debates available online live as well, even if you don't have a subscription to a cable service provider, just because the debates are being an informed voter is a very important situation in this country, as well as the world. Everybody should be informed voters. So again, that debate is happening 9 o'clock tonight on CNN, I know for sure, and possibly other networks will carry the feed as well. However, I do believe CNN is moderating the debate. And analyzing Hillary Clinton there to close out the show today, she was able to be emphatic without overstating herself. However, she does kind of step on Senator Sanders a little bit, and he even says, as my buddy Ian pointed out online, listening to it, excuse me, I'm talking here. And we've seen that happen numerous times, especially from candidates that don't have the full backing of the party or might not have as much funding or what have you. Well, I don't know. I guess the name that comes to mind would be Ross Perot and the old Saturday Night Live sketches where he was always like, can I finish? Can I finish? Because he would do the same thing in debates. And you saw it in the Republican debates. And so we're going to see a lot of that. I personally think in tonight's debate, we're going to see former Secretary of State Clinton maintain her composure. She's probably going to say some hard things to Donald Trump. Donald Trump, on the other hand, is probably going to get very excited about some of the things that he says. He's probably going to make personal attacks based upon his previous performances. And he's going to attempt to appeal to a more aggressive voter base versus a somewhat neutral voter base as what I expect to see from former Secretary of State Clinton. So again, the debates happening tonight, presidential debates between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, that's going down at 9 o'clock this evening. Again, coverage on CNN all day, and then it will be live at 9 o'clock. I'm TJ the DJ. This has been Topical Applications on WODU, the heartbeat of Old Dominion University. You can find us here each and every Monday morning from 10:30 to 11:30, where we cover general public interest stories. And again, today was the upcoming presidential debates tonight. Now back to your regularly scheduled music here on WODU.